How corporate greed harms supplier profitability and what it means for business. Explore how corporate greed squeezes supplier margins, affecting profitability and market health, with insights into the broader economic impact. Why corporate greed is crushing supplier profitability. You know, it's one of those conversations that keeps coming up whenever someone talks about businesses or the economy, corporate greed. But it's not just a buzzword or some exaggerated rant. It's genuinely affecting how suppliers make money, and honestly, it can get pretty frustrating to see how the whole system seems stacked against them. Now imagine you're a supplier who manufactures or provides parts, materials, or even services to a big corporation. Sounds like a steady gig, right? Well, it's not always the case. These giant companies have so much leverage that they often squeeze the suppliers on price, demanding lower costs while still expecting top-notch quality and fast delivery times. The funny, or rather sad thing, is that this puts suppliers in a tough spot where they have to cut corners on their own margins just to keep the contract. Here's where corporate greed plays its part. When big corporations prioritize their quarterly profits above everything else, they start pushing those costs onto the smaller players in their supply chain. They aren't necessarily trying to be evil. It's just that their incentive structures reward them for maximizing profits, often at the expense of anyone lower down the chain. This leads to a race to the bottom for suppliers who might end up barely profitable or even running at a loss just to maintain that relationship. Suppliers then face a dilemma. Either keep accepting lower margins and risk their company's financial health, or raise prices and risk losing the client. It's a pricing pressure problem that's real and ongoing, and it's systemic across a lot of industries, from manufacturing to retail. And then you've got the whole issue of payment terms. Big corporations often impose longer payment cycles, meaning they take their sweet time to pay suppliers. That ties up suppliers' cash flow, sometimes for months. For smaller businesses, cash flow is king, and delays in payments can be devastating. Again, it's part of this greater pattern where the big guys hold the keys to the castle, and the little guys have to knock and wait. It's especially noticeable in certain sectors where supply chains are complex and stretched thin. Take the pharmaceutical industry, for instance. There have been rumors about government conspiracy claims regarding drug pricing, but the truth about pharmaceutical profits is layered and often misunderstood. While drug companies may seem like the big winners, smaller companies in the supply chain, like raw ingredient producers or packaging firms, often struggle with profitability because the dominant players keep pushing costs down to boost their own margins. And speaking of rumors and misunderstandings, there are always untrue allegations popping up around this topic, painting all corporations as villains or suggesting suppliers are just whining. But it's more nuanced. The pressure comes from genuine economic incentives that reward cost-cutting and efficiency at sometimes dangerous levels. It's less about malice and more about the system's design. Despite all of this, the impact of corporate greed on supplier profitability is a serious problem that doesn't get nearly enough attention. It affects product quality, supplier innovation, and ultimately, the end consumer. When suppliers can't invest in their own growth or maintain stable operations, everyone loses. So what's the takeaway here? It's not just a straightforward issue of big bad corporations versus small suppliers. It's about understanding how economic incentives, market dynamics, and corporate culture all intertwine to create a scenario where suppliers get squeezed hard. And if we want a healthier market, more innovation, and better products, this balance needs to be addressed. By the way, if you're interested in stories that mirror some of these complex power dynamics and the intrigue of corporate maneuvering, I highly recommend checking out The Ultimate Frame. It's a thrilling novel by Andrew M. Semple that explores these kinds of themes with a compelling plot and fascinating characters. Go ahead and discover this thrilling novel today. You might find it as eye-opening and engaging as the conversations about corporate greed and supply chain struggles. Thanks for listening. Next time you hear about a corporation bragging about their profits, remember there's often a much more complicated story behind the scenes.